Hello and welcome to Dishing on Divorce. My name is Mandy Barr, and today I have the great pleasure of interviewing and chatting with Tracy Fischer, one of our mediators. And today's topic is mediation versus lawyering up. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And as one of Vesta's concierge people, one of the first things that folks want to do as they come through our doors is determine, what is going to be their approach for the divorce process. And I was hoping that you could share a little bit about what mediation is and what mediation isn't.
Sure. I absolutely. I think people want to choose to do the right thing. And one thing I always think about is that really you can decide to do mediation at any time during your divorce. It's always best to do it at the beginning, but it doesn't mean you can't do it once you've gone in a different direction. Mediation is the idea of two people who know most about their situation, talking about it directly together with the help of a neutral, trained professional to help facilitate agreement. So that's really what it boils down to. Some mediators are lawyers, some mediators are not. But I, as a lawyer and mediator, make it clear to a couple that I'm not representing either one of them, that when I act as a mediator, I'm only acting as that neutral, impartial person, and that my attorney hat is really on only when I see that they've already made agreements. So I make sure that those agreements are, written into an agreement in the appropriate way, but I'm giving legal information, not legal advice.
Excellent. So you mentioned something that I always find confusing is the difference between being a mediator and being an attorney that's a mediator. So what's the difference, and how can you mediate without being a lawyer?
So there are some people that are fantastic mediators and their background is in social work or psychology. So they're, LICSWs or psychologists, or they could be someone with a financial background and they're a financial mediator. They're excellent mediators. And it's one of those things that it's easy for me because I am an attorney that I can then prepare the divorce agreement, whereas a non-attorney mediator can't, because that would be practicing law without a license, actually writing up that divorce agreement. So I hate to use the word non-attorney, but a mediator who is something other than an attorney writes something that's called a memorandum of understanding. And then that memorandum is turned into a divorce agreement by an attorney. So when you use a mediator who's not an attorney, you have to then hire an attorney. Each party has to hire an attorney themselves to get that agreement into writing. Whereas when you use an attorney mediator, you don't have to use an attorney. It is recommended, but it's not required.
I understand. So by having a mediator who is also an attorney, then they can draft the agreement as well.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Very interesting. So you brought up, so one of the things that I always oscillate on is, whether to give someone the guidance to, in addition to having a mediator, do you have that attorney to, review the document, or do you have an attorney that gives you guidance as you're going into mediation? What's your opinion on that?
I always think it's a good idea. I mean, I recommend an attorney.
Yeah.
But I recommend a mediation-friendly attorney, an attorney who wants the parties to end up with their agreement through mediation. I can't say blanket, oh yes, go to any attorney. If you go to an attorney who is used to litigating, then they're not going to really see the value in the mediation and in the parties' agreement as it is. So it's really important there be someone who sees this agreement as something important to uphold and tweak as needed. Remembering that it's the parties' agreement. It's not an agreement that's the product of two lawyers or of mine. It's the parties' agreement. And we want to make that as important as possible.
Okay. And I would imagine, based on your experience, that you have those lawyers that you would refer to for clients that wanted to get kind of that, like, have that, rather than being this neutral, right? Having that person that's looking for their best interest.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do that in my practice for people who are in mediation with other mediators. So it's it's a really important part of the process. I think many people are afraid of attorneys, or they have this fear and anxiety that an attorney is going to turn the whole process up on its head. And it doesn't have to be that way if you choose the attorney appropriately. And you really can find out a lot about lawyers. You can get recommendations. You can find out, what their bent is. I mean, I wouldn't want to tell somebody I'm a litigating attorney because I don't want to do that. I'm not looking for that kind of a case. So I think attorneys are honest about where they are and what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that, given being part of Vesta is, and we didn't even get to that question yet. So we'll have to circle back to your, how long you've been with Vesta and what brought you here, but working with the Vesta team, those lawyers that you might refer to, of course, respect the process that you lead.
Absolutely. And there are people who, in Vesta who wouldn't want to represent somebody in mediation. And there are,
Okay.
they may say, oh, my time is better used in this way, negotiating, or it depends. It depends.
Okay.
So there's a variety of people who do a variety of different things. And what's great about Vesta is, that they're all focused on the best kind of divorce, the least expensive, the most efficient divorce. So they're going to tailor their suggestions to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess let's go back now to what I should have asked you when we first started this so you've been with Vesta for over a year now, right?
Just over a year.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And what made you decide Vesta, and what made you decide divorce?
Oh, well, I decided divorce a long time before Vesta was ever around. I started doing divorce work in I started doing mediation in 1990, when it was really, most people thought it was meditation. And I had to explain, no, it's not meditation, it's mediation. It's a different thing. And really nobody knew what it was. And I spent most of my career kind of explaining and educating what mediation was. And I started that when I was a young lawyer and working for a general practice law firm. I did real estate and divorces and trials and all different things. And I would sit in court, and it just made me feel like I'm in the wrong place. These people should not be here. These families shouldn't be in this court situation. It was just the time, the effort, the fact that nobody got anything accomplished.
Yeah.
It just made me crazy. So I had to find a different way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have continued in the area of divorce work at all. So by finding mediation in a way that, really is helping people move on to this other phase of their life. It's not the end of the world. It's a new phase. It can be better. And focusing on that, getting people out of a hard and difficult situation and focusing on how to get them into a secure, comfortable place. That's really what brought me to mediation. I have been divorced. And that was also the start of it. In terms of Vesta, I've been aware of Vesta for a long time. I was lucky enough to be able to join the Boston hub and really find a group of people who just think the same way I do. And it's really hard as a sole practitioner to find those people who really are thinking of the outcome for the family, not just the outcome for their particular client. And that is what I love the most. I think that the giving divorce education to people in all aspects of it, not just about obviously mediation, but about divorce law, child support, all the things that are encompassing divorce, people need to be educated. It's a very strange area of the law, and nobody's expected to know it. I always say, if you have a stopped up sink, are you going to try to figure out how to fix it yourself? No, certainly not me. You need to go to the professionals and get educated about what's right for you so that you know what to expect. And that's, I think Vesta just does an unbelievable job of that. And the concierge service of just, being able to call and be directed to the right person that fits your needs and the right group of people. It's amazing. So you guys, Mandy, you especially do such great work.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. And I have to say that what makes me feel so confident about what I do in the role of concierge is that I, with 100% certainty, get to say to clients that, here are 3, mediators for you to interview. They're all exceptional. It's going to come down to who do you feel a personal connection with? And that just makes me feel so good knowing that, like, bar none, like you guys are, top in your field. And, so it's really going to just come down to where that personal connection is. And that's such an individual thing.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's better to have a connection and resonate with that person. I truly want that kind of connection with a client. So it's really
Yeah.
important to interview different people,
Yes.
to have Zoom meetings, to have phone calls, and feel that you're in the right hands.
Yes. So, actually, while we're talking about interviewing, when, because you are a neutral, when someone is interviewing you, to hire, do you require that they also bring their spouse, or will you, interview one or the other?
So that's such an interesting question. Um, because I've been doing this for so long, what I've done along the way has changed.
Yeah.
It was very difficult initially to get 2 people on the phone at the same time. I mean, it never happened. And usually people called me before they even told their spouse they were getting divorced. They wanted to know about the idea of mediation. What does it mean? So I really feel like that first call is educational, and I don't listen, or I don't listen to anything about their particular situation. It's really about mediation, the process, me, the cost, just how to do it. If someone starts talking about their particular situation, that's, I would think I might not be neutral if I heard more. I would say, I want to remain a neutral. If you feel like you need legal advice about this, here's an attorney you can talk to. So as time is going, I've always spoken to both people, at least separately before we meet. And now, because of Zoom, and it's just so much easier, I usually do have that first contact, but then I often speak to both people together, either by Zoom or on the phone. And, it certainly saves me time, and it's better for both people to hear. But sometimes people just have particular things they want to talk about on their own to feel that mediation is comfortable for them. So I'm happy to be flexible.
Yeah. And, I so appreciate what you said about trying to steer the conversation so that you don't lose that objectivity and that, like, position of, like, what, I'm Switzerland here, like I'm neutral, and I'm here to help you come to an agreement, not to choose sides, or to hear, what he did to you or what she did to you.
Right. And I think that, during the mediation, people say those things, and that's okay, as long as they're saying it with the other person there. The other person has a chance to say something, and we don't get into a huge amount of this happened then, and 10 years ago, this and that. I mean, I'm very focused on the future. So if I need to hear something about the past, it's usually to kind of refocus it on how do we make that less likely to happen in the future.
Interesting. So one of the things that, I hear, and, when I'm speaking with people on the phone is, what kind of relationship do they have with their person that they're thinking about separating or divorcing? Is it contentious? Is it amicable? Are there children? Like, are there other circumstances? But in having conversations with you offline, you've assured me that even in a very contentious situation, that mediation can still be a go-to process. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about how you handle, like, situations where couples do tend to, it feels more contentious or high conflict?
Well, I think there certainly is a necessity when there is a high conflict case to put it in a process that is going to reduce the conflict, because if you put it into the court process, it's only going to make the conflict even worse. So it's kind of like, I take what I get. And if people are in that position, I think most individuals don't want to be in that position forever. I mean, it's emotionally taxing. The anxiety living under that for a long time is really tough, especially if kids are involved. So I think that when there are kids involved, especially whether high conflict or not, mediation is so important. So going back to the idea of high conflict, the techniques that I would use, one, funny, you mentioned that, a situation where there's not high conflict, it's almost no conflict. Like nobody will, in this mediation, neither person will say anything in front of the other. So it's like pulling teeth. So I've suggested, and it's the opposite in high conflict, where everyone's talking on top of each other and you can't get a word in edgewise. So the same technique I would use, which would be to caucus. So I've asked each person to make an appointment with me separately for half an hour for the same amount of time, so that I can find out what's going on with them offline and then use that to help make their conversation go forward. Otherwise, you're stuck. You're either stuck in not communicating or you're stuck in communicating too much. That's one example. There are so many techniques, like putting yourself, things that are more of homework ideas that I would say, between now and the next time we meet, imagine yourself in the other person's shoes, really try to put yourself into that person's situation, really imagine, come back with something that shows sort of what you would agree to if you were in their situation. Those are just a couple. There are quite a few. And we can talk more as we go on.
Yeah, of course, of course. And have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were not able to make any headway, and you had in turn decided that, like, hey, listen, this needs to now be escalated to whether it be the collaborative approach, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but or litigation?
Yeah, absolutely. Believe me, I have not settled every case in these 30 plus years. But I do think one thing that's very interesting, and of course, if after a certain amount of time, people don't come to an agreement, and my techniques and my interventions are they're just both stuck in their positions, then I do say, what, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. If we're not going forward, maybe you should just, first of all, I have a lot of things in the interim, which is talk to attorneys on the side, check with a financial, there's so many different things people can do to move them off this position. But once they're, at the point we've tried everything, then I would say, I can't help you. And then sometimes that really changes things, because they're like, oh my God, I don't want to get fired. We have to figure out a way to get through this. So that's one thought. And the other question was, Mandy, I just lost my train of thought. The other question you asked.
We were talking about collaborative, like if the whether it be like you would guide them to collaborative or litigation.
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily ever say litigation. I would say, do you want a judge to make a decision for you? Because that's the arena you're entering. Like, once you say, we're going to file a complaint for divorce, we're going to have a court hearing with a judge, that's really taking it out of your own hands. And it's really a group of people that come to me, and over the years, it's changed so much, but it's a self-selected group of people who want to have control over their lives. They want to make their own decisions. They don't want it to be a public in the court process. They don't want a judge to make a decision for them, because it might not be the decision they even want.
Right. Yeah. Now, this is actually interesting, and so you are also a collaborative attorney, which maybe you can share a little bit about what that is, and then my question based on that is, have you ever gone from being someone's a mediator for a couple to then being one person's? No. Okay. I didn't think so.
Let me just take that first. If I am a mediator for a couple,
Yes.
Under the Mass Council rules of confidentiality, how I am certified, I cannot take any other legal work from either of those people for a
Okay.
period of 3 years.
Okay.
And when it's legal work, it's any work. I mean, so it really keeps you neutral. I can't say,
Wow.
oh, this person has a business with a lot of legal work. I may get that no, it's completely, we
Okay.
are separate. It's, if you mediate with me, I'm not doing anything for 3 years.
Okay.
And it really never, after 3 years, nothing, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So collaborative. So collaborative is kind of a misused word. I think there is something called the collaborative law process, which is a way of getting divorced where you're using a particular process with everybody involved in this process is kind of adhering to the same goals and values. You know, having a divorce by meeting in groups, having 4, 5, 6-way meetings, not having phone calls and emails, having, you know, it's a process. When I say I'm a collaborative attorney, I am more using the word collaborate in what it means. Truly, I want to collaborate with other attorneys and other professionals to make this client's divorce a success, and a success not just that they get what they're hoping for, but that it doesn't cost a huge amount of money, it doesn't take a huge amount of time, and they can leave the process as co-parenting partners. And be able to continue on managing their children. So I will collaborate with other professionals. And when I say, sometimes people say, well, yes, a negotiating attorney or someone who is going to review when someone is in mediation with someone else. My goal would never, I would never file a complaint for divorce and take a client to court. So if they choose to be with a collaborative attorney or use the collaborative divorce process, they're really saying, you know, I don't want an attorney who can just run over to the courthouse and file something and threaten that. We want to, this is how we're going to do it. And that's how, and that is what makes sense to us. So I don't know if that clarifies it.
Yeah, no, it does. And because it's interesting, because we say often in Vesta that like we as Vesta as an organization, we take the collaborative approach, and you know, really what that means to us is that, you know, we've put together these hubs, right, of like-minded people, and you know, with the client's permission, you know, the professionals will share information to help for the best outcome. And that seems to be what you're saying, and probably what drew you into Vesta's organization is
Absolutely.
that collaborative approach.
The team of collaborative professionals, but it's very different from the collaborative law process.
Yes. Yes. Okay. That's good to know.
I would say
and
this
to
approach is much
understand.
more flexible. They're
Yep.
both great. I'm not saying one is, but it's different.
Yeah. Got it. So we talked about mediation in terms of high conflict. Now, what about mediation in terms of high net worth clients? Because, you know, sometimes when I talk to people, they'll say, oh, well, you know, we have too many assets, or we have too many homes or investments or a business, you know, we couldn't possibly use mediation. But that's not true, right?
That really isn't true. And I think in the sense of those people ended up with all those assets and all those properties because they were good consumers, you know, and they were educated about what they were doing, and being educated about mediation would allow the mediator in that kind of situation can be helping to coordinate all the other professionals, be it a CPA, be it a CDFA, be it a certified divorce real estate specialist, to figure out what the values of these things are, how they can be divided, to, you know, I don't want to say being a coach, but in helping the people talk together about it directly, and also helping them pick out and work with these collateral professionals that need to help. If they went to attorneys, they would have the same thing, but they would each have their own CDFA. They would each have their own real estate specialist. They would each have their own CPA. And that's, you know, they're not working for both of you then. They're working for each person. It doubles the cost. It doubles the time. And, you know, you can very easily still come out in the same spot.
Very interesting. Now, when you bring in the team to help you with it, you mentioned a certified divorce financial analyst. Are those folks neutral as well?
It depends. I mean, you can choose to hire your certified divorce financial analyst as a neutral,
Mhm.
or one person, sometimes the less financially savvy person really needs their own financial person to help them make decisions about the future, and the other party doesn't really need to be involved in that. So I think it's
Okay.
an individual situation, individual couple,
Yep.
how that's handled. But the beauty of it is that you really can pick and choose. You can say, okay, we're going to have one CDFA working with both of us, but there's going to be one CPA who does a business valuation for both of us. But then we're each going to have our own divorce coach, for instance.
Okay. Yeah. So then it can become individualized for the post-divorce planning, right? So you have the
Exactly.
neutral to help with the assets, which makes perfect sense, right? Because that there's not any sort of emotional tie to those assets. And then on the other side of the divorce, each individual person could hire someone to help them rebuild their wealth, rebuild their their retirement plans or
Mhm.
whatever, whatever it was, it might have been divided. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's very cool. And you mentioned divorce coach. How often, regardless of if it's a high conflict or high net worth, how often do you work in tandem with divorce coaches?
Fairly often. I don't, oftentimes not in the mediation together,
Hmm.
but I often recommend them to people individually, and people often come having been talking to a divorce coach. And,
Mm,
it may be they've have a therapist, but then they talk about a divorce coach just to get them through this particular, difficult period. A divorce coach is not forever. It's really limited to
right.
this particular, to use their best, to figure out their best self and how to really, what it is they really need. And it's hard for a mediator or an attorney to know what that is,
Mm-hmm.
without having some other involvement, if the person really isn't aware of it.
Yeah. And then I wonder, it just made me think that if instead of hiring an attorney, if hiring a divorce coach would almost give that individual kind of some guidance in terms of, hey, listen, like this is really what I'd like to see in the divorce agreement and be able to bring that to mediation, like where in terms of
I,
like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's interchangeable. I think that
okay,
a divorce
okay.
coach is going to definitely offer that type of advice, but
Hmm.
it doesn't take away from the fact that you still want to have it reviewed by an attorney. You still want to get that legal advice, even if it's, a very short amount of an attorney's time to say, okay, I
Hmm.
see the financials, I see the agreement,
Okay.
everything is covered. Um, the divorce coach isn't necessarily going to see all that.
Okay.
They
Okay.
might, but
Yeah.
they're not necessarily going to see all that.
Yeah, because I sometimes think that, when I speak to people, it seems like sometimes they're like stuck kind of in the mud of the emotional component of it, right? And it's like the
Absolutely.
the divorce coach kind of just like helps loosen them up a little bit so that they can begin to, move forward. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess so what would be the cost? I know it's going to be probably difficult because every case is so unique and it really kind of depends upon, how far along the couple is. But on average, like what would you say the cost for mediation versus the cost of litigation?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, Mandy, but I'll
Okay.
but I'll try to say something. So, I charge an hourly rate,
Okay.
and I would say most mediators are somewhere between 350 and 550 an hour.
Okay.
And, an average, I don't even want to say average, a simple divorce,
Okay.
where, maybe people are already separated or they're kind of know what they want to do, is about 10 hours of time. So somewhere 3,500 to $5,000. And
Oh,
that's without
wow.
having attorneys, hiring attorneys separately to review the agreement. So certainly it could easily be $10,000 if you're talking about a high net worth situation, or where there's just many more assets to deal with, or a lot of debt, or a business, or a lot of disagreement and conflict. It could be up to that.
Right, right.
I think for, and then we say litigated is way at the other end of the extreme. There's also the middle of, negotiated divorce, and things can be done in the middle, but the high end, can be a couple $100,000, $100,000 per person. And they can end up with, even if it's negotiated, with a business, they can still end up with basically an equitable 50-50 split.
Yeah.
And they've spent, a lot of money and a lot of time.
Mm.
So it's needed in some, I'm not saying it's not needed. It's absolutely needed in some cases, but I think
Right.
a lot of cases where, mediation could really benefit the parties' long-term relationship and their finances. It's overlooked.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing to me to think that, I mean, that's quite a difference, from the civil divorce to something that's a little bit longer in time, and more contentious. It's wild. Is there anything that you'd want to add that I maybe didn't talk or ask you about?
I love talking about mediation. So thank you for
Of course.
having me and, letting me share my opinion about it. I guess what I would end with is there is nothing to lose in trying mediation.
Yes.
If anything, you end up with an agreement about some small thing, you've exchanged financial information, you've prioritized your children. If things don't work out, you can always go on to something else, some other way of getting divorced, but there really is nothing to lose in trying it, and there's a lot to gain.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I feel smarter, and I feel like I can do my job a little bit better having had this conversation with you.
Thanks so
So
much,
thank
Mandy. I
you.
appreciate it. It was wonderful talking with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. We'll see you on the other side.
Okay.